So again, one of the big goals of this study is to quantify root intrusion into the tiles, because that's a big concern with landowners. So we had a special kind of modification of the practice design here that the tile contractor put in for us. So there's 6 plots here, so 2 replicates of each tree species. So on the west end of each plot, coming off the lateral line, are these cleanouts or access ports. What we're going to do, we're going to order in the future a large kind of scope cam that's going to stretch from here all the way across the width of the plot, 145 feet, and we're going to visually, using that camera, quantify root intrusion into this lateral tile. This is obviously installed with kind of standard black perforated pipe. There's also a greenhouse component of this study where we're looking at different tile, what I'll call tile technologies or tile designs, and we have pots packed with willow cuttings, and we're seeing which design blocks roots the best. So our designs include a number of different perforation diameters, so I believe it's 1/8 of an inch and 1/16 of an inch perforation diameter. We're looking at mesh coatings around the perforated tile to see if that would impact root intrusion. We're looking at copper wire, which is a natural root deterrent, so tube wrapped with copper wire. And lastly, we're looking at kind of a newish design where we have a cap over the tile that creates an air gap. And if you know about roots, they don't grow in air. They need to grow through a soil-water matrix. So that cap creates an air gap that prevents roots from getting into that tile. So as I mentioned before, we've got 2 types of tree establishment here. Before, we saw where we actually planted tree seedlings spaced 6 foot apart with rows 10 foot apart. That's one way to establish seedlings. There's pros and cons for that way. The second way that we wanted to demonstrate here is called direct seeding. That's where you actually plant the seed, thousands of seeds per acre, to establish a very dense, thickly closed, or rapidly closing canopy. So if you look behind me here, these were the seedling rows that we initially planted. We wanted to get something on the landscape in year 1. The next year, actually, we came back and we did what was called, again, direct seeding. So we spread thousands of seeds per acre on a worked up or tilled up site and then lightly disc them over. And now we can see, if you look down here closely, we've got hundreds per acre, or per this section of small, this is the swamp white oak plot. But if you can see, we've got so many of these little germinating oak seedlings here. And again, the big difference is they're not in rows. So there's pros and cons for each kind. Troy mentioned before, planting in rows, it's easy to maintain. You know where the rows are. It's easy to get your mower, your sprayer up and down those rows. One advantage to doing direct seeding is, however, again, with seedlings, you need a lot of herbicide, you need a lot of mowing to get that weed competition down. With direct seeding, you get so many more stems per acre, you get a very quick canopy closure, and that really drives your weed control right off the bat. But on the back end of this, the direct seeding, you've got so many stems per acre, you're going to have to do a bit more work 8-10 years down the road thinning these out so there's enough growing space for the seedlings that you do want to promote. Whereas planting seedlings, you do have to do a little bit more work on the front end with weed control. So just 2 kind of things to consider when you're thinking about which style you'd like to implement. But we really wanted to include this as an extension component of this project. One thing to think about, and both of these practices you can manipulate to accomplish this, but trees in the natural setting, when they're more dense, more stems per acre, they have to fight up to get sunlight, right? They can't expand laterally to get the sunlight to their crowns, right? So this direct seeding practice really puts all those stems on the ground, so these forces those seedlings to fight up, 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 and again, it forces a quick canopy closure for weed control. If you're planting in rows, you can tighten up that row spacing so that they do have that lateral competition to grow straight up. But one thing you're going to have to think of ahead is you're going to have to come in there and thin those out. So picking out the dominant ones, the ones that match your objectives, whether it's water quality, wildlife, or timber production, picking those crop trees and thinning out the ones around them eventually to have that one get full sun to the canopy. But spacing is a big consideration, and again, working with your professional forester and your site, they can help you determine the proper spacing. But in general, tight spacing like direct seeding and a little bit tighter spacing in the seedling plantings can force those trees to grow up and have a nice kind of clean bowl on the base. So saturated riparian forest buffers are a cost-shareable practice through NRCS, CP22S. However, there's a ton of questions I think we need to answer to have these gain in popularity and gain in adoption on the landscape. And really, one of the goals of this is to have people realize that trees can definitely be an asset to the overall agricultural enterprise.